Guess what? Native English speakers make mistakes all the time when they speak English. If you're like most students, you probably spent years learning English in school, studying all the grammar rules and trying to get everything perfect. But in reality, when you go into the real world and you talk to native speakers, you'll see they make mistakes all the time. They're using the wrong tense, they're using the wrong conjugation, they're using double negatives, and it can be frustrating because it makes you think, why did I spend all this time learning grammar when native speakers don't seem to pay much attention to it? In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about some of the most common mistakes, grammatical mistakes, that native English speakers make so you can identify them, avoid them, and speak English better than most native speakers. My name is Michael Anton. I'm the founder of English at the Ready, and it's my goal to make you fluent in English. Now, first up on our list is a very common mistake, and that's using the word real instead of really. You'll often hear native speakers say things like, it's real hot today, or she's real nice, when the correct way of saying this would be, it's really hot today, or she's really nice. Never use real as a synonym for very. You have to say really. Real means true. For example, his story was real. It was a real story. Really is a synonym for very. It makes something more intense. For example, it's really easy to learn English if you have the right method. And speaking of that, if you do want to learn English with a method that has helped thousands of students improve, then click the link in the description below to learn more about our programs. You can apply, and if we think we can help you, we'll be in touch. Now, moving on to the next mistake. And this is super common, especially in casual conversation. You'll often hear native speakers get rid of the word do when asking questions. For example, instead of saying things like, do you want to go? They might say, you want to go? They get rid of the word do in a question. And obviously in correct English, in standard English, this is not acceptable. When asking a question, you have to always include the auxiliary verb to do. For example, do you like pizza? But when speaking, native speakers often drop that. And they say, you like pizza? You like pasta? You like learning English? They drop the word do. Now, it's also very common for native speakers to write could of, or should of, or would of, when they mean could have, should have, or would have. This one kind of makes sense, actually, if you think about it, because when speaking quickly, these words sound very similar. Could have, would have, should have. The correct way of saying this would be could have, would have, or should have, but lots of native speakers write of instead of have. Again, totally incorrect. Never make this mistake. It looks wrong on paper, but it's very common. A lot of native speakers don't know the difference. It's also very common for native English speakers to say things like, there's a lot of cars on the road, when in reality they should actually say, there are a lot of cars on the road. There are a lot of cars. Now, there is, or as a contraction, theirs, is always singular. For example, there's time left in today's class, or there is nice weather at the beach, right? There's nice weather at the beach. We use there are when we're talking about plurals. For example, there are a lot of cars, plural, cars on the road. There are. But again, a lot of native speakers will just say, there's a lot of cars on the road, or there's a lot of people at the beach. Not correct, but common. Something I heard a lot at school was to never end a sentence with a preposition. And frankly, I disagree with this. In modern English, it's totally acceptable to end a sentence with a preposition. For example, we were told you should never say something like, this is the house I grew up in. And instead you need to say, this is the house in which I grew up. But let's be honest here, nobody says that. everybody would phrase it like, this is the house I grew up in. They'd put the preposition at the end. That's the most natural way of doing it. That's the most common. That's how native speakers talk. So this one isn't necessarily a grammatical mistake because, to be honest, I don't actually think this is a mistake. It's actually the norm. But if you ever hear the rule, or maybe you've heard this rule, that you should never end a sentence with a preposition, I think it's pretty safe to say you can disregard this. You can ignore this because in the real world, it's super common to end a sentence with a preposition. It's the same with starting sentences with and or but. Again, it's common to hear that you should never start a sentence with the words and or but. But in reality, it's very common to do so, and I think it's perfectly acceptable, especially when you're telling a story or you want to emphasize something. It can be quite useful to create a sentence and have it on its own and begin it with the word and or but. So again, this is a common rule, but I don't agree with it, and I don't think you should necessarily pay too much attention to it. Now, let's look at a tricky one. Which is correct? My friend and I, or me and my friend? Trick question. They're actually both correct. However, we use them differently depending on the situation. We use my friend and I as the subject of a sentence. For example, my friend and I went to the grocery store. We use me and my friend as the object of the sentence. For example, our teacher talked to me and my friend. There's a very simple trick to tell the difference. All you have to do is get rid of the word my friend. So get rid of that, and if it makes sense to use me, then you should use me, and if it makes sense to use I, then you should use I. For example, we wouldn't say our teacher spoke to I. We'd say our teacher spoke to me. We wouldn't say me went to the grocery store. We would say I went to the grocery store. Just as we would say my friend and I went to the grocery store, or our teacher spoke to me and my friend. Common mistake. Native speakers make this mistake all the time. Just be careful. Me and my friend is the object, and my friend and I is the subject. All right, let's talk about double negatives. These are quite common, especially in the United States, but they're not correct in standard English. For example, saying things like, I don't know nothing. We hear this all the time. I don't know nothing, or he didn't know nobody, or he didn't say nothing. This is very common, and you'll hear this especially if you're watching movies or you're listening to native speakers in the real world, but technically this is not correct. And I don't recommend using double negatives, especially in more formal situations. Instead, you can replace nothing or nobody with anything or anybody. For example, I didn't say anything. He didn't know anybody. It's a very simple fix, and it will make you sound a lot more correct. Okay, let's look at one more word, and I don't want to call this a mistake, but it's certainly not standard English, and that's the word ain't. Ain't means something like is not or are not, and it's common in the US. You might also hear this in parts of the UK as well. For example, I ain't got no time means I don't have any time. Certainly not standard English, but it is common. It's more of a slang word or common in casual, informal speech. I ain't got no time. So you can see that native speakers make mistakes, or rather speak in ways that are not standard all the time. And what I want you to take away from this video is the fact that you don't need to speak English perfectly to speak English fluently. To speak English fluently means to express your ideas and to share your thoughts with the world without letting language get in the way. And you don't have to have perfect grammar to do this. Obviously, you should work on grammar. You should try to speak as correctly as possible. But at the end of the day, your priority needs to be communication, opening your mouth, speaking, getting your ideas across, because that's what language is all about. When you're in the real world, nothing is going to be perfect. You have to live with imperfection and focus on what really matters, which is speaking. If you want to speak more English and you want to improve your speaking, we have several amazing programs that are available through application. So if you are interested in applying, you can click the link in the description below to learn a bit more and to submit an application if you would like to study with us. I hope you found this video useful. Let me know in the comments, did you learn anything new today? What other mistakes do native speakers make that you hear all the time? I want to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe to English at the Ready here on YouTube, leave a like, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye for now.